Hi there. I'm Todd Leonard.
And my name is Herb Montgomery, and we're just talking. Todd was about to steal the thunder.
I had so much I wanted to say, but what I will tell you is that I would love for you to click the thumb button, to click the subscribe button, and the bell icon so that you can stay in touch with our program and that you will help our audience grow by YouTube being so impressed with our huge audience numbers.
So, if you're new to this show, each week Todd and I take a moment to talk about the upcoming weekend's lectionary reading from the Gospels. Our hope is to talk about those in the context of love and inclusion and justice. Our goal is that our conversation will be just talking, as in justice, but that also our conversation would inspire you, along with us, to do more than just talking. So, Todd, what passage are we looking at this week?
Our Advent journey continues in the Gospel of Luke. This is our second week. Luke chapter 3, verses 1 through 6.
Which is a great passage. Like, I always
Yeah.
have a hard time. Well, I mean, I grew up in a religious environment, and every Christmas it was always Handel's Messiah. And there are so many Advent passages that are Christmas to me. It's very difficult. And I know this is like heresy to say this, but it's always been difficult for me to keep Advent and Christmas separate.
Right. It is. It's very hard. And it's hard in our culture in North America to really engage with Advent when the whole culture is full on Christmas from the day after Halloween.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So this week, this is the beginning of Luke's launch into John, not John's launch into Luke, Luke's launch into John. And he starts off in the tradition of the Hebrew prophets, which you're going to see why that's important here. There's a narrative tool that's being used. What's going to be contrasted in our narrative this week is the priesthood versus the prophets. And maybe we could start by talking about that a little bit, Todd.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be all right?
It's fine with me, Herb.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't want to do anything you don't want to, Todd.
You have my blessing.
Thanks, Father Todd. If you understand the tradition, there were these. There's two traditions that were in tension with each other in the culture, and let me back up just a little bit. Whenever we say the priesthood, we always think today, most of us think religion. We think religious. But when this starts off, it mentions Pontius Pilate, who is governor, Herod, who is the ruler in Galilee, talks about the other regions, and then it comes down to the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas. And these were the high priesthood, remember, was Rome's long arm, kind of that extension of Rome in Judea, centered in Jerusalem, in the same way that Herod was an extension of Rome in
Mm-hmm.
Galilee. They chose
Mm-hmm.
the high priesthood every year. These were the ways through which Rome could establish its presence, its control, and extract resources from whatever region. Herod did a great job. The temple state did a great job too.
Right.
I want people to understand this politically, because these two traditions, you have the priesthood tradition, the tradition of the priests, and the traditions of the prophets, the prophetic tradition. And the prophets were the ones that always spoke truth to those in power when those in power did injustice, when they committed
Mm-hmm.
an injustice. The ones who were in power were the priests. That was the central power structure. The priests were on the inside. The prophets were always on the outside, speaking in, trying to hold them accountable, provide some conscience. What makes it remarkable is that if you remember Luke 1 and Luke 2, John, his genealogy, he is the son of a priest. He's a
Right.
Levite. He should have been part of the inside. He could have been part of the priesthood. And it's kind of like he comes of age, looks at what his father was doing. And this isn't, I'm not necessarily saying he was disparaging about his father, but he looked at the priesthood to which his father belonged. And he could have chosen, I'm going to bring about change from the inside. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But
Mm-hmm.
instead, he forsakes being a priest himself and goes out into the wilderness to practice the tradition of the prophets, and he becomes a prophetic voice instead. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that adds a whole layer that I think a lot of people completely miss, frankly, and frankly, I've missed too much, is that he really is. It's kind of like sometimes we've seen, I mean, in some ways, it's sometimes you hear about the bad pastor's kid rebelling against the pastor's family and going off and just behaving poorly and saying, yeah, being raised in the pastor's family is no wonderful experience. It's horrible. It's awful. Let me tell you about all these horrible things on the inside. I mean, it's kind of like that good kid gone bad. For John, it's not that. It's him saying, no, I'm actually following in the spirit of seeking after God as a maybe as a priest would want to do, but I know that I'm not going to be able to I can't follow after God in this way because it is so rotten to the
Rome
core.
had so co-opted it. Yeah.
So I have to come at it from this way. And so I'm going to come as the bad priest coming in from the outside speaking against the very institution in which I was brought up in. I think it is a he's not just I think it's important to say he's not just grabbing attention for being a prophet. He people would know about this. People would know this is the son of a priest. This is somebody who is supposed to be in the priesthood who is actually calling out the priesthood, calling out the religious class, the religious leaders, and calling out the whole corrupt system from top to bottom. He is going after it rather than, like you said, quietly, carefully working at it piece by piece, bit by bit on the inside.
He doesn't pick the most diplomatic path.
No, he's not what you would say is tactful. No.
Yeah. And too, we're going to look at this more next week. Josephus says defines his John's preaching as um calling the people to practice justice towards one another, right? And it
Mm,
wasn't just like the people. It included Herod, who had him beheaded. It included the priests and the Pharisees. These were all, it's helpful to remember these were all political roles in that culture. These aren't,
yeah.
yeah, we try to Christianize everything and make it a religious story. It's a deeply political story. Matter of fact, Ched Myers in his book, um, Say to This Mountain, Mark's Story of Discipleship, on page 12, he makes a comment about the wilderness that John was a prophet in. And this is key because, well, I love it because not only was John preaching in the wilderness around in Judea, but even Jesus too was preaching in the villages of Galilee. In both regions, Galilee and Judea, they both chose to kind of grassroots movement kind of thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Well, this is what Ched says. While the margin, talking about the wilderness, while the margin has a primarily negative political connotation, like someone's being marginalized, as a place of disenfranchisement, Mark ascribes to it a primarily positive theological value.
Mm-hmm.
It is the place where the sovereignty of God is made manifest, where the story of liberation is renewed, where God's intervention in history occurs. And I love this for two reasons. Number one, for people who feel like they're in the wilderness right now, God is there. God is not at the centered locations of privileged society. God is always found on the edges and the margins of whatever community, society, or group that practices that way of organizing human
Mm-hmm.
beings. right?
Mm-hmm. That's
But
right.
the second thing is, so for those of you who feel like you're in the wilderness, but the second thing that speaks to me here is that too often those of us who have some level of privilege think that the work of justice is to invite others to my table of injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And some tables shouldn't be shared, some tables should be flipped. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so what this story is telling me is that change comes from the outside in, from the grassroots up, from the edges to the center. That we need to be not giving equal opportunity for others to compete in an unjust system. We need to be looking for where God is already at work on the edges, the margins, in the grassroots,
Mm-hmm.
and join alongside that work. In other words, it's the old saying, God is with them and we are with God when we are with them.
Right.
It's not about letting them into us. It's about, oh, God's already at work where they're at.
Right.
I'm the one being left out. How can I
Right.
add
That's right.
my effort, my energy? How can I come alongside, not taking over, not trying to take control, not trying to, practice privilege, but how can I come alongside and support and help and be part of, participate in the work that we see
Mm-hmm.
God doing to bring about just change in the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I think that's so so true that I want to be able to say it's so true in a more truer way because there is um I had 2.5 years ago come to the place in my pastoral ministry where I felt like, and it had been gnawing at me for years before, where I felt like as much as I loved my congregation and longed for my congregation to be a place of refuge and a place of inclusion and a place of justice, it always felt like it was so much work to try to create it to be that type of place. Because despite all the wonderful people and all the good efforts that are made there, and I mean that sincerely. And I was one of those well intentioned people, and I don't put myself above, I put myself very much within and part of that community who was very much influenced by the same church culture as the rest of them. That church culture, that institution that has been so influenced by capital C corporate church culture and capital A American church culture and capital C Constantinian church culture um, has so has been so I really don't want to say the word corrupted. I'm going to go with wounded.
Okay.
Um, so wounded that it can't find the capacity to be a margin. It is completely inept at becoming a marginalized community. It's a completely inept of going to the margins. And
Mm.
so when we say we want to reach people at the margins, we are trying to bring them in to a wounded system that is at the center of a wounded
That's
system of
also
power.
that's also wounding at the same time people on the margins while you're
Correct.
trying to invite them in.
Correct. Even the most well-intentioned groups are still part of the system. And this is the thing, this breaks my heart to say this. And I say this knowing that there may be people from my congregation who might see this and say, Todd, what are you saying? You're betraying us. And I say this with this is Jesus talks the parable of the pouring new wine into old wineskins. And I think there is just something fundamentally that I think John, coming from his perspective, felt like, I can't lead people to be ready for the Messiah. I can't lead people towards this kingdom of God that I believe is coming and lead them to Jerusalem. I have to lead them out here to the margins. And Jesus doing the same thing. He can't say, I'm going to bring about a reformation in the temple. He only came into the temple near the end of his ministry and flipped the tables, as you said. Most of his ministry was way outside, because that's where the people who were harmed by the system were. So you're right. The change and the real community and the real work of God happens in new communities established in the margins rather than at the center.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's already at work there. In other words, look for it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. We don't have to go create it. We just have to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's already present, already happening. It's already out there. We're and I like the analogy that you used. We're trying to invite them into us, but they've already got it. The gospel's already out there. God's already present with them. God's already working through them to bring about change. And I'm thinking about, when you talk about church versus outside the church, too often what we're trying to make our church be, there are other organizations and other communities outside the church that are already doing that way so much better, way better than what we could possibly do. We're working so hard to do like this much of it, and they've got it already. Let's go support that and help that and push that along. But I do want to say this to those of you who may be right now in your own journey, for whatever reason, you feel like you're in the wilderness, on the margins. Maybe you used to be part of an establishment that you're no longer, or an institution even that you're no longer a part of. Maybe that's by choice. Maybe you got pushed out. But for whatever reason, whatever the background is, however you got here, if you feel like you're in the wilderness this Advent season, you're just in the right story. You're in the right story. That's where God shows up and brings change. You're in the right place. The world isn't over. It's just beginning. That's the message I need this year.
I'm trying
Did
to
you lose
get.
your mic?
No, I'm back. There's a lot of noise coming from another room, and so I'm trying to
Oh, you were
get
trying
it
to mute it
to
out. Got it.
turn down for a minute. So, but
So let's talk for a
keep
minute
going.
then. Let's talk for a minute then, Todd, on what was actually happening in the wilderness in our narrative this week. In our reading, John was out there talking about preparing. And again, for those of you who hear this language and it's overtly religious to you, I just want you to stretch. This is much more about justice than it is about religion. Just prepare the way of the Lord, make straight paths for him. Every valley shall be filled in, every mountain and hill made low. The crooked road shall become straight, the rough ways smooth, and all the people will see God's salvation. In other words, in the most challenging and extraordinary harm being done to the people by the Roman Empire, we're talking about one of the most hopeless eras of Rome's relationship with the Jewish people. John was out in the wilderness preparing for justice's arrival, preparing for when justice would come. And that gives me a little bit of hope right now, because I look out at my own political horizon in the United States here, and I'm just looking for anything to hold on to right now. And no matter um, how hard it gets, um, there's still a work of preparing for justice to come, for when justice arrives. And I'll give you an example. I live in a very conservative state, um, not progressive, and yet we have deep challenges with economic justice, gender-related justice, racial justice, LGBTQ justice. One of the organizations in this state that I am fond of is a group called Fairness West Virginia. And for over a decade now, they have been going to small towns and municipalities. They started with the big cities, but now they're going to all the small towns and municipalities. And they're working with them through whatever means are available to expand their present non-discrimination ordinances to include non-discrimination against LGBTQ people as well. And they're just like doing in this town, this little town, this little town, this little town. The goal is to create such a critical mass of little municipalities that already have this on their books, so that when they go to the state and call for a statewide non-discrimination of LGBTQ people for housing, for employment, for public services, when they do that, it won't be a big leap. Most of the state will already be practicing that locally. So it'll be almost seamless for it to become statewide, right? To me, that is a great example. I mean, my little town that I live in here, we participated in this about a decade ago. I just read where a new town last week just did it, just expanded their non-discrimination ordinances here recently. And it's still ongoing, still out there, they're still doing it. I just think that this is a great example of where, in some of the most challenging uphill circumstances, like there's no reason to hope that my state would make this kind of decision anytime soon, right? And yet they're still out there making the crooked roads straight, making the rough ways smooth, trying to fill in the valleys, leveling the mountains. They're trying to make a path for justice when it shows up so that it can get here. You know what I'm saying? And that's what John was doing out there, according to the narrative. He's in the wilderness. It's got all the connotations we talked about so far. But what's he doing out there? He's preparing for justice's arrival when it shows up, even when there is no evidence that justice will ever come. Matter of fact, it has all the evidence in the world to say it never will.
Right. And I think that is the definition of hope. That's the definition of hope. Is you keep doing those little things, you throw in those little pebbles in the pond when there's no evidence, you're making a lick of difference. And that,
honestly, we don't know.
No. And so you say, somewhere, somehow, this 2-minute speech in front of this school board or this city council, somehow, some way, is part of a picture that in 5, 10, 15, 20 years will have done something that historically, you were telling me about a person that I should be listening to who does great of putting things into historical perspective, that looking back, it was because somebody did that little speech in front of a school board that things slowly changed.
Yeah, justice is a decades-long marathon. It's not an overnight sprint, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know what part our efforts today are going to play in the bigger picture.
That's right. And this is my moment for the soapbox, because Herb is much more vocal about national stuff, and I affirm much of what he says, but I'm not the one who vocally speaks it. Um, my bandwagon is local. I There is so much that can happen locally in the work of justice. And so, especially when nationally it looks like we have
Yes.
nowhere to
Yes.
go, my God, there is so much work that could be accomplished
Locally.
locally.
That's the preparation in the wilderness.
I watched, I watched, I can tell you, I watched the opposite happen between 2020 and 2024 happen in when I was living in California and watching uh, hatred gain a foothold in the local school system
Using the same tactics.
using the same local tactics because they had no chance, even at the state level in California, of getting anywhere, let alone the national, because they were out of power. But they made inroads locally in 2020 to 2024.
Both
I saw
injustice
it
and
work.
justice don't trickle down, they trickle up.
That's right. They were smart in what they did, as much as it was painful to watch and painful to see the results of. So I know what can happen at the local level. So there is so much hope in the local level. The other thing that I saw today, I love Anne Lamott, and she posted, I think it was today. And she, of course, if you read her enough, you know that she, of course, was exasperated and tormented by this election. And and she's saying, "What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? How can I handle this? How am I going to survive? What?" And she has drawn encouragement from the story of Jesus with the woman caught in adultery from the Gospel of John, where she, where Jesus says to her accusers, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." That's all he says. And then he just stays next to the woman and doodles in the sand. All he does is he stays next to the woman and doodles in the sand. And so maybe right now, we may not be able to do a whole lot, but we can stay with our people. And when I say our people, people on the margins,
People who
that
are about to be harmed.
people that are about to be harmed, and we stay with them.
Yeah.
And we say, I'm not leaving your side.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what I can do right now because maybe some of the mechanisms that I thought I was going to have are taken away from me right now, but I am not leaving your side. And I will at least look your accusers in the eye and let them know that they're going to have to go through me. And I'll
Yes. Yeah. The mechanisms of injustice are better prepared this time. And they plan on hitting the ground running this time after Inauguration Day.
mhm.
But we're still here
That's right.
and we're better prepared this time too. We didn't know what
Yeah.
was happening last time.
Right.
And these communities, I love what you're saying. These communities of resistance and solidarity, these are what we need to be leaning into. And even if it's
Yeah.
just standing with each other and doodling in the sand, I know there's
Yeah.
a lot more to do than doodling in the sand. I know
Yeah.
that. But the pressing together. But
That's right.
Jesus' solution was community. And right now, these communities, that's where we need to be. The communities that are in the wilderness, lean into those.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I have this week, Todd. You got any other thoughts on this passage?
I'm just going to hope that chapter 3, verse 6, that says, all flesh shall see the salvation of God.
Yeah.
I'm going to claim that and hope in that. And I'm going to hope for the kingdom of justice to continue to move forward. That's
Yeah. And when they
and
said
not
all people will
and
see God's salvation, they meant social salvation.
absolutely. This is all in the context of seeing Jerusalem reformed and transformed, and seeing Rome, the empire, crumble, and seeing righteousness and holiness, not piety, but righteousness and justice reign throughout the land again, and poverty
That
eradicated, and everyone having food on their plate, and people being taken care of again.
There's so much religious trauma and baggage around that word salvation. And as Christians, we tend to always think that means getting to heaven. But
Yeah,
that's
it
not the
has nothing
way
to do
that
with
this,
that.
it has nothing to do with that. In the original context, it was all the people will see God's salvation. It was liberation and restoration
That's
of
right.
the people who were suffering and hurting. It
Yep.
was justice. So yeah, it's like Jackie Lewis. Jackie Lewis, in her book Fierce Love, she makes this statement: if there is such a thing as salvation, none of us are saved till all of us are saved.
That's right.
And it's
That's right.
talking about social salvation.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let's keep making the mountains low, making
Yeah.
the crooked straight, and making the rough smooth.
And if you're one of my LGBTQ people out there listening to this, my friends, we don't mean straight like that. You're just fine the way you are.
No,
You're just fine the way you are.
that's right.
I live in West Virginia. We wish some of our roads were more straight, but we don't mean like that.
No.
As I remember one time I went to a gathering of LGBTQ Christians. They'd invited me there to be a guest speaker for a week. And one of the night talks were at a little chapel that was on this retreat area. And they said, "Have you ever been to the chapel before?" I said, "No, I don't even know how to get there." They said, "Well, it's the one up there." I said, "Oh, so I just go straight up the hill?" No, they said, "No, no, no, no. Nobody here goes straight up the hill. We
No.
go gaily forward up the hill."
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So that's true. Let us gaily move forward in making the road more accessible
That's it.
to
That's not what we
all.
mean. That's right. Easier. Take away the obstacles for justice to arrive. That's
That's
all it's
right.
saying. Remove
Smooth
the
those
obstacles.
potholes.
That's right. Now
And when I say
there's
potholes, I'm not speaking against those who use marijuana from time to time.
thanks, Todd.
Count on me to always make things more awkward. That's what I'm here for.
I appreciate you so much.
What's happening with Renewed Heart Ministries, Herb?
Oh, Renewed Heart Ministries, we're perking right along. We're coming down to the end of the year. And this year, at the end of 2024, we're trying to reach our ministry goals for next year. I want to just again sincerely thank everyone who's supporting Renewed Heart Ministries and enabling our work to go forward. Um, if you'd like to join them in supporting Renewed Heart Ministries, you can do that by going to renewedheartministries.com and clicking donate. And the good news, what's going on right now is that all donations from now to the end of the year at Renewed Heart Ministries are being matched dollar for dollar. So you can make your support go twice as far. You can make your impact go twice as far. And you can make our efforts at providing a voice for change and for love and inclusion, make that go twice as far as well. So it's we're real thankful. We're very thankful, real thankful. To sound like a true West Virginian there. We're real thankful. We're very thankful for this opportunity to be able to offer that to our supporters this month and last month. Um, And while you're there, make sure you take advantage of all the free resources that Renewed Heart Ministries has on their website, and check us out on all your social media platforms. We have podcasts that come out every week. We have this show. We have a blog, the articles that come out. We have another series of articles that come out at a different location, but you can find all of those, at least a pathway to all of those, starting at renewedheartministries.com. And we don't charge anything for any of those. And again, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Renewed Heart Ministries, we are simply a ministry that's dedicated to helping people find the intersection of their faith and engaging social justice concerns in our world today. Todd, what's going on with you, bud?
I started working as a hotel valet this week.
Did you really?
I did. And that's my day job. The other thing I do is I get to coach, and I have a couple clients that I'm starting to coach. Not to be valets. I would not wish anybody to have to do that as a long-term career option. I hope that would only be, like for me, as something that you do temporary while you're working on a degree towards something else, or looking for other work that's more in line with your talents and gifts. But I would like to direct you to my website, tjlcc.com. There you can read what a couple people have experienced in their coaching with me, and you can hear an interview that I did recently with someone about my coaching, and just love for you to check that out. And if you would be interested in just walking with somebody who can just be a support to you in your life's journey, it would be my pleasure to talk with you more about that and see if that would be something that I could help you with. So,
Awesome.
with that, we are glad that you've been with us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. In the meantime, we wish you all the best
Happy
and
Advent, everyone.
happy Advent.